Well, hello. I am here, even though I am 30 minutes late. Better late than never, right? Okay, here we go. Heading into chapter 19. Welcome to each and every comment, share, and subscribe. And if you'd like to donate to the Jumanji and Diva Stainless Steel Cage Fund, please feel free to hit the Cash App, which is Madam Whipass on the dollar sign. It would be greatly appreciated. And if you do not know who Jumanji and Diva are, well, if you look at my avatar, there they go. They're two Amazon parrots. Thank you so much, and I shall begin. Title is Head Down the Wedding Aisle, Even If You Have to Hobble. July 2003, Wichita. Oh man, my glasses broke. It was the night before my wedding. Near the end of July 2003, it was past midnight, and I was sitting at my parents' kitchen table fretting. Let me see. Dad sat down next to me. I handed him the two pieces. Hmm, we're not going to be able to fix these. The nose piece has broken in half. Darn, I still need the pack too. Well, kiddo, you better go do that, and we'll see about getting you a new pair of glasses in the morning before the wedding. Dad looked assured, although his eyes had been giving him away over the past month. His baby girl was getting married and moving 16 hours away. I'm not sure he knew what to do about it. Back in June, Darian called to tell me, we're moving to Detroit. It wasn't even a question asking if I wanted to move to Detroit. It was a statement. We needed jobs, anywhere in the country, and Detroit was it. Darian had been offered a graphic designer job, which he'd accepted and agreed to start a week after our wedding. I hung up the phone. Hey, Mom, we're moving to Detroit. She nearly spilled the spaghetti she was draining in the sink. I had graduated again in May 2003 and moved back in with my parents for a few months before my wedding. I now had 2 degrees and no job. In June, Darian flew to Detroit to meet his new company and find us an apartment in the western suburbs of the metro area. He called saying, I found a 600 square foot 2 bedroom. It has a large picture window that looks out onto a small green park. I picked it because of the view for you. I agreed it sounded perfect, and he put down our deposit. A few weeks before the wedding, I was quickly rounding our kitchen corner, and I stepped into debt same ankle I twisted in the canyon years before. Dad barked at me as if it was somehow my fault I'd gotten hurt. The word stung, but I was used to it. He had been hard on Mom and me for our klutziness since I was little, repeatedly saying things like, watch where you're going. Be more careful. It's your fault you fell. Now you've done it. If you end up covered in scars, it'll make you ugly and no one will want to marry you. I spent the next few weeks hobbling around in a black lace up brace, wondering how my fat, swollen ankle was going to fit into my petite cream heels. I rarely wore heels, but Mom insisted on them under my wedding dress. I would have preferred to get married barefoot, bum ankle or not. 2 days before our wedding, several members of our family helped us decorate Darian's church and reception space, which was larger than my parents' church. We wound twinkling white lights onto white canopies overlooking cake stands and hung silver and burgundy bowls from wooden pews. In the sanctuary, I called out for help to Dave, my soon to be father in law, who gently replied, "You can call me Dad if you want." Aww. Okay, I like that. Dave was a bit taller than Darian, with a head full of silvery white hair. Darian's mom, Donna, petite with brown hair and a sparkle in her eyes, was busy scurrying from project to project. Warm and welcoming, his parents always made me feel included and often made me laugh, traits carried over in their son. In the midst of decorating, I stepped outside onto a fire escape for some air. I was a stressed out, hot mess. Darian joined me, calmly handing me my engagement ring, already soldered to my wedding band. When I lifted it to the light, I was startled to read the inscription: "Love never fails." The R was missing. I lifted Darian's hand, and his was right. Love never fails. Oh well. We were moving to Michigan 3 days after our wedding, so I didn't get it fixed. Wedding day, I woke up early, groggy eyed with broken glasses, but my bag packed. By 10 o'clock, I was waiting at the mall for the gate to be lifted at LensCrafters, my hair curled in ribbons, my nails freshly done in dark burgundy. Peering into the closed store, I picked out my new wire rims. I surprised the clerk when I said, "It's my wedding day. I get married in 3 hours. I need new glasses, and those right there. They will work just fine." At noon, Dad, wearing his black suit and tie, picked up my glasses so I could see my own wedding and groom. We gathered for photos before our wedding, huge smiles on our faces. Darian in a black tuxedo with a white vest and tie, me tall in my heels, desiring to spin like a princess with my fluttering butterflies and a veil set behind a sparkly headband. Darian's groomsmen, including his brother Aaron, wore black suits and silver ties. My cousin Andrea and two of my friends were bridesmaids, wearing burgundy dresses with matching necklaces and earrings. At 1 o'clock on Saturday, July 26, 2003, Dad looked at me as we waited in the vestibule. He was full of emotion, trying to hold back tears and nerves. He extended his arm and said, "You ready?" Taking a deep breath, I took his arm, holding a bouquet of white roses ringed in burgundy daisies, canon in D major. Near the front of the church, my foot slightly twisted, and I bumped into a strand of flowers hanging from a pew, knocking them down with a thud. Red faced, I gave Darian a half smile and a shrug, then turned toward Dad and hugged him tight. Verses from First Corinthians were read. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. We said our vows, sticking to a modern exchange. There was no plighting anyone's troth. Darian's eyes were filled with happiness, but I chatted nervously to him during our song, Come What May, from Moulin Rouge. I was immensely relieved when the pastor dismissed us as husband and wife, and we flew back down the aisle to Third Days I've Always Loved. so I could remove my heels, thankful to be barefoot under my dress. At the reception, we tried to make it around to everyone to say goodbye, and it hit me. We would be leaving Kansas in 3 days. All of a sudden, I felt homesick. Outside, Darien's red Corsica awaited us, festively decorated, brimming full of balloons. After breaking through rolls of plastic wrap, we were greeted with a blast of bright colored confetti from the air conditioner. We honeymooned the next 2 nights in a suite in Old Town, and on Monday we picked up a new mattress and jammed a moving truck full with the help of our families. Monday night, wiped out and trying to save money, we settled for Darien's parents' basement. He gave me the couch and slept on the floor with his blue heeler skipper. Early Tuesday, Dad drove the moving van and Mom rode along. They took the Indiana route after St. Louis, giving us newlyweds a few days to ourselves. We set out for Illinois in the Corsica, our AC breaking while crossing the sweltering Midwest the first day. We quickly blamed the confetti still occasionally spitting out at us. Wednesday evening, after a detour to Chicago to shop at IKEA, we passed a large blue "Welcome to Michigan" sign. I was mesmerized by the cooler air and majestic pine trees as we crossed I-94 to Detroit. We arrived late to our hotel and were surprised to hear my parents' voices directly across the hallway from our room. So much for the honeymoon. The next morning, Darien and Dad unloaded the truck while Mom and I went to rent a car for their return trip home. That evening, surrounded by boxes and unwilling to search for our new bed sheets or anything else we needed, we splurged for one last night in a hotel. On Friday morning, we said goodbye to my parents, Mom and I both in tears after butting heads the day before. I had tried to push them away because I didn't want them to leave, just as I had 7 years before in college. Dad was more matter of fact as he hugged me tight. His daughter was all grown up and married. Helping us move was his way of showing love. It would be 9 months before we would see them or any other family again. Chapter 20. Title is Some Carpet Cleaners Can Leave Unexpected Results. 2005 in Wichita, Kansas, or Park City, one. But it was in Kansas. Let me take a deep breath. Okay. Your dad has been coming home late, stressed out. You know how he can get. Want to talk to him? Mom and I were chatting on the phone just as we had every week for the past 9 years. I talked to Dad for about 10 minutes, not about anything much. The tire tread on our old car, making sure to keep up with oil changes, and how the weather was surprisingly nice for February in Wichita, cold and lousy in Michigan. All right, well, you stay warm, kiddo. Proud of you and Darien. Make it there. Love you. Making it there. It had been more like make it or break it, sink or swim, whatever was said to young couples. Darien's job started 3 days after we moved, but he wasn't paid for a month, so we lived off wedding money and a cashed in life insurance policy from his folks our first weeks. While Darien was working, I alternated between unpacking, applying for teaching jobs, and wigging out, eating cheese puffs by the handfuls, and watching Days of Our Lives. I thought getting married and moving was going to be one big fun adventure, but the reality of being far from home soon landed. Not long after we moved in, The flimsy. Wait, hold on. Okay. Not long after we moved in, the flip storage area in our apartment building's basement was broken into. We only had boxes and ours, but I grew fearful downstairs in a dark basement while doing laundry. I started waiting for Darren to come home before hauling the loads up and down the stairs. I didn't even want to park in the garage under our apartment, deciding instead to park near our building's front door when I was alone. My night terrors also caught up with us after we were married. I'd wake up screaming in Darian's ear or landing a solid punch or kick. He'd jump while I fumbled for the light. It's okay, you're okay, you're safe. Go back to sleep. It's okay. It's not. There's a no, nothing's there. It's okay. You're okay. You're safe. Try to sleep. He close to his chest, blocking out the world with his body. A few weeks after we moved in, our power went out late on a Thursday afternoon. I heard we were under another terrorist attack on my battery operated radio, and when I couldn't reach Darian at work, in a panic, I called his father, who was usually home from work at 4 o'clock. Dave reassured me it wasn't terrorism, it was a blackout in a good chunk of the northeastern and midwestern United States. Darren would be home as soon as he could, Dave said. With the streetlights out, it took Darren 2 hours to drive the normal 20 minutes. On Friday, I was hot and miserable with an earache and fever and asked if we could escape to Indiana where there was electricity. I pressed my head into the passenger side window while Darian meandered far into the metro area in search of an open gas station. On fumes, we sat in a long line of cars paying with rolled coins, our laundry money, the only cash we had on us. With enough fuel, we booked it south toward 2 nights of hot food, showers, and air conditioning paid by credit card. We arrived back home Sunday evening to a stinky apartment, a fridge full of groceries gone to waste, and more debt. I Googled nearby doctors, was diagnosed with the ear infection, and put on antibiotics. We got in more of a bind the next week when our bank misplaced our deposit, shorting us, blaming the blackout. In October, after struggling for 2 months to find a teaching job, I gave up, deciding any job would do. I had a student loan to pay. I saw a poster for seasonal work at Target and was soon hired for second shift and weekends. Then I'd go to work in the afternoons. Darren would hitch a ride to my nearby store, pick up the car, and come back after my shift was over. We'd often run through Taco Bell for a fourth meal and crash, doing it all over the next day. On evenings off, we sat in camp chairs that kept breaking, ate at a folding table, and watched Hockey Night in Canada through a foiled wrapped antenna connected to a flickering green tinted television that had fallen during the move. A few weeks after my job started, fed up with our lousy chairs, I declared to Darian, that's it, we're buying a couch. Fields like Dorothy. We figured we would quickly find a church in Michigan and make new friends and get settled. but we only visited a few churches before I started working Sundays. During the fall, we had a few dinners out with some of Darian's coworkers and shared our first Thanksgiving with a couple who didn't have family in Michigan either. But most of the time, it was just the two of us. I remember calling my mom in December in tears, letting her know we couldn't make it home for Christmas due to my job. I would be working Christmas Eve and the days following Christmas. Darian and I had a quiet Christmas day, opening gifts that had been shipped to us, next to a simple tree we bought with my discount. I made Christmas dinner for two, and it was back to a busy store the next day. It was just Darian and me against the world. Occasionally we'd get into it, but it was still just him and me. One winter evening, we got into a silly fight about nothing I can remember, and I threw foot powder at him. I ran off into the bedroom but came back out when I heard the door slam, surprised to find a profanities sprinkled. I'm sorry, actually, some not whatever. I ran off to the bedroom but came back out when I heard the door slam, surprised to find profanity sprinkled in the carpet. I wonder what he said. Hmm. Soon Darren came back home with carpet cleaner, and I later heard the vacuum. That night, he broke in the couch after I tossed his pillow and a small blanket out in the hall. The next morning, there was nothing to do but fall over and giggle when I saw a faint swear word stained permanently into the carpet. He told me off with foot powder and made it worse with carpet cleaner. Mm, mm, mm. In the new year, my temporary job became permanent, and we were able to buy a new TV and entertainment center, delivered in time for the Super Bowl. No more green tinted sports for us. We also got word my folks would be visiting in May and his parents in June. Knowing family was coming in the spring helped pull me through our first long, dreary winter. Mm, mm, mm. And four. The cherry trees were blooming when my family arrived in Michigan at the beginning of May. Dad, Mom, and Brian arrived on Mom's birthday after driving 2 days in my parents' new minivan. I'd anxiously been fluttering around the apartment all day and was nearly dancing on my toes by the time I rang the buzzer. An authentic experience is what Dad called Mom's birthday dinner at a favorite Italian restaurant that night, a family place nestled in a small downtown area a few miles east of where we lived. The next day, we left for a short trip to the west of Michigan while Darian stayed behind working. In Holland, we spent the afternoon walking up and down rows of brightly colored tulips at our farm, where Mom bought a blue and white pitcher for her collection. That evening, we walked out on the pier to the big red lighthouse and watched the sun lower onto Lake Michigan from a sugar soft beach. Near Ludington, the next morning, Dad, Brian, and I hiked the steep tree covered dunes at PJ Hoffmaster State Park, working our way down to Lake Michigan, whose chilly waves broke on my bare feet for the first time. We etched the sand with driftwood we trailed behind us and watched the water quickly erase our footprints. Later that week, we spent the day with Darian, meandering around the massive exhibit hall at the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn. That evening, we had dinner in Greektown and took a turn at the slot machines at the casino. A welcome Raider family sign greeted us from a small motel, and Frankenmuth later that week. We were sure we'd ever get Dad out of Bronner's. Well, I'm sorry, we weren't sure we'd ever get Dad out of Bronner's, the world's largest Christmas store, after he spotted the miniature towns festively decorated with trains running in circles. We dropped Mom off to shop the next morning while Dad, Brian, and I drove along the coast of Lake Huron, stopping at a wooden walkway along the Sable River to watch for bald eagles. I'd come to this spot with Darian in October before, catching a glimpse of an eagle fishing. That afternoon, I was thrilled to stand next to Dad as two eagles fought and tumbled in the sky for a few moments. Dad let me choose where to go on the map that day and told me on our way back to pick up Mom that I'd chosen well. I thought it was the first of many family trips to Michigan, but I couldn't have been more wrong. I had no idea we were just months away from the world crashing down on us. If anyone should have known, it would have been Dad. But that's impossible to say, then or now. July 2004. During the summer of 2004, I read about the BTK serial killer who had resurfaced after decades of silence in Wichita. He had committed 7 murders in the 1970s and sent taunting letters to the police and media, but then ceased communication in 1979. It had been assumed he was dead or in prison. But in the spring of 2004, he claimed an eighth murder from 1986 and started mailing letters and leaving drops similar to his behavior in the 1970s. This led to an immense manhunt. This was the first I heard of the murders or the infamous acronym. I was surprised and taken aback by the news that this was happening back home, but I don't recall following the local Wichita news closely in 2004. I do remember 2 things. I mentioned the manhunt to Darian, who had read about it also, and sometime that summer or fall, I asked Mom on the phone about the murders in the 1970s. She told me that at the time a lot of women were fearful. She had been scared. Since Dad would sometimes work late and was taking night classes at WSU, but Dad had reassured her, told her not to worry, she was safe. In the late fall, I read about the new possible attributes of BTK. I remember puzzling over the list, coming back to it a few times because it was nagging at me. BTK had written to the police that he had a cousin in Missouri and a grandfather who played the fiddle and died of lung disease. His father died in World War II. He was in the military in the 1960s and had a lifelong fascination with trains and always lived near a railroad. I kept thinking of a hazy, dreamlike image of a white house with black trim, a house like my grandparents' house, but that didn't make any sense. I determined the list was odd but couldn't make anything solid from it, and I dropped it when I heard in December there had been an arrest. It ended up being a false arrest, and I don't remember following the news after that. Hindsight would become hurtling down soon enough, but I'm not alone in thinking my ordinary, normal, everyman dad was the last person on earth who would be BTK. In September, I started substitute teaching in 5 districts. The farthest district was an hour away, so it was rough having to drive Darian to work and then out west to reach a classroom by 9 at the latest. The pay was good though, and I soon quit my job at Target, delighted to have evenings and weekends free to spend with Darian. And after being laid off from his avionics job in Wichita, my brother enlisted in the Navy and commenced boot camp, located north of Chicago, in the fall. He invited us and my folks to his graduation ceremony in early November, after which he would be headed to the East Coast for submarine school and then out to sea for months at a time. I was hopeful my folks could come to Chicago so we could spend a few days together, but Dad told us they couldn't make it, saying he was too busy to get away. I was unsure of what to think. That was extremely uncharacteristic of my dad. But with Chicago only 4 hours away for us, Darian and I were able to drive over for a long weekend. On an early Friday morning, we cheered as Brian marched in with his shipmates. After his ceremony, he gave us a hug, happy to see us and to get off base to spend a couple of days sightseeing. On our walk to the Shed Aquarium that afternoon, stinging wind blasted us, and Brian had to grab his white sailor's cap so it wouldn't blow into Lake Michigan. The next day, we enjoyed the sun as we wandered around the Brookfield Zoo. Brian told us he might be able to fly home for Christmas. Darry and I already had our plane tickets and said we hoped to see him. December 2004. Several inches of snow fell the night before we were supposed to fly home in December, and the world was still a blur of bluish gray when we left the pre-dawn darkness for the airport. Darren was calm as he cautiously made his way down the one cleared lane of the highway, but I was gripping the passenger armrest with white knuckles. We reached the airport in time, but found out our gate that our plane was delayed and we were going to miss our connection at O'Hare. Between the snow, the delay, and having only flown twice in my life, I was an anxious mess. Hands around my drink, trying to warm my entire body. When we arrived in O'Hare hours later, we had to wait in a long line to rebook a flight for the next day and to secure a hotel. We stood in another long line to pick up our checked bags, only to learn they had continued to their destination. I only packed the bare minimum in my carry on and froze in my thin hoodie outside. My winter coat, gloves, and hat were on a plane to Kansas. We headed back to the airport on Christmas Eve and found out we were going to have to make a connection through St. Louis to reach Wichita. So much for Christmas Eve service with my family at church. While sitting at the gate in St. Louis, Darian's name was called to come to the desk. They wanted to bump him. I started crying, telling the attendant the story of the last 2 days. Oh, I didn't realize you were traveling together. A man traveling alone overheard the tale of my woe and offered to take the bump. I was so relieved. I could have hugged him. We were going to be home for Christmas just in time. We crashed in my parents' guest room, the one I painted lilac 2 years before, and opened to forget my dad's face. Aged overnight, his eyes oddly sad on Christmas morning when he unwrapped a special frame for Brian's naval photograph. A few evenings later, Darry and I went with Dad back to the airport to pick up Brian. He was wearing his U.S. Navy blues and carrying a green duffel bag, which my dad hefted onto his shoulder after embracing Brian in a big hug. While Brian was home, we went to a movie at the Warren Old Town Theater, a place Dad considered extra nifty because you could order food right at your seat. After having hot dogs and fries, Dad and I passed back and forth the largest tub of buttered popcorn you can get. It's odd, the things one remembers, like looking to my left and watching my dad try to open a mustard packet with his teeth, just like I do. But I can't recall what movie we saw. What I can tell you is this: It was the last movie I'd ever seen with him. A few days later, we were up early to pack before our flight back to Michigan. I had stepped out of our bedroom and run into Dad in the hallway. He was dressed for work in his brown compliance officer uniform. He added a stack of note cards to his right breast pocket, a dark brown winter coat with a badge, a dark brown hat, and an intimidating utility belt. You know, were those what she thought was note cards? Were those his slick ads? You're probably like, well, what are slick ads? Madam with ass. Well, in BTK's world, slick ads were women from magazines. He'd cut them out and placed them on index cards, and he had like a bunch of them. You know, maybe 50, maybe 75. I don't know. But he would go through his slick ads and he'd pick out a girl for the day and take that particular slick ad and put it on the seat of the passenger side in his truck or whatever. And that would be his date for the day. Getting back to the book. The belt had a collapsible stick baton, mace, a Leatherman multi-tool, a knife, and Lord knows what else. He was freshly shaven and smelled of Old Spice, and I embraced him in a long bear hug. He was warm, solid, comforting, and I didn't want to let go. I'm not sure when we will get home again, I said. Yeah, we're going to try and come up and see you guys again soon, all right? All right, love you. See you in a while. Yeah, love you too. See you in a while. Just a girl telling her dad goodbye. I had no reason to think that was the last time I'd ever see him. Thursday, February 24th, 2005. Yeah, love you too. Talk to you soon. After the phone call with my folks, I pulled a chocolate bundt cake out of the oven and set to work on the powdered sugar icing while it cooled. Darren and I ate a slice before going to bed, not knowing that by the same time tomorrow, our lives would be completely upended. The last phone call. When you lose someone, there are always lasts. The last hug, the last Christmas, the last vacation, the last chocolate milkshake, the last fishing trip, the last time you hiked side by side next to the person you loved. And as soon as you learn there is a last, you do your best to seal those memories tight. Even in my case, in which the man I lost was still very much alive. Even in my case, wherever with pitch black for years to come. All right, so we are up to part 4 of the book and heading into chapter 22. And so it says part 4, when all else has fallen away. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Isaiah 41:10. So that's the scripture for part 4 of the book. And so I have read 19, 20, and 21. Who's that one person? Oh, they left. I've read 19, 20, and 21. And I will return sometime this week to go ahead and read beginning from chapter 22. Thank you all for tuning in. Again, I greatly appreciate you all. And you know what? Don't go nowhere. I, as I was ending, I just read the first sentence of chapter 22. I'm going to keep going. Chapter 22. Offer the FBI your DNA. It's just easier that way. 1:30 p.m., February 25th, 2005, Detroit. Your dad is BTK. I was spinning in the middle of our living room trying to make sense the short distance to our dark eggplant couch, trying to come back to life, trying to breathe, trying to steady myself against the weight of the incomprehensible words the FBI agent had uttered. Your dad is BTK. Love never fails. A moment ago, my hand had brushed against the brightly colored stained glass picture hanging in our kitchen. My left thumb twisted my wedding band with its inscription, Love Never Fails. Darian. I needed Darian. I grabbed onto the tall arm of the couch and turned toward the worried-looking man holding his yellow legal pad and pencil to his side. He was standing right near the worn cuss word spot in the carpet. I was tempted to point out the faded words to him. Can I call my husband at work? He needs to come home. Yes, you can call him, but you can't tell him why I'm here. I sat down and called Darian's cell phone, shaking my body, blazing white hot, my voice almost maniacal, with the oddest feeling of being on edge, yet relieved the man in the car in my home with the badge wasn't here to hurt me. Hello? The FBI is here. It's okay, I'm safe. Where? What are you talking about? The man? He's an FBI agent. What man? The one in the car by the dumpster. He is in our home now. He's an FBI agent. You need to come home. I'm on my way already. What's going on? Why is he there? Darian's voice was heightening with concern and confusion. I can't tell you on the phone. Can you come home? I'm close. Be there shortly. I hung up and looked at the agent again. Can I call my grandma and granddad? They live near us, near my folks. I'm really worried about my mom and my family. You can call them, but you can't tell them about your dad. I was already dialing. Grandma, it's Kerri. Something has happened at mom's and dad's. Mom is safe. She's with the police, but dad has been arrested. Hold on, Kerri. I'm going to walk to the corner and I will call you back. Hold on. When she called me back, she told me there was a police and other unmarked cars down the street at my house. Grandma was scared and worried, and soon she and Granddad would be brought in for questioning too. The agent sat down next to me, and that made me feel a bit better. I ran my hand through my hair and nervously redid my scrunchie down at my mint green PJs. Uh, can I get dressed? Yeah, but the phone has to stay here. Jesus Christ. They just come in your house and start dictating what you can and cannot do. I left my silver flip phone and somehow made it off the couch and down the hall to our bedroom. I tossed my pajamas to the floor. I'd never wear them again, and threw on a purple K-State t-shirt and jeans. I didn't even close the door when I changed. As I came back out to the living room, still in my bare feet, I heard keys rattling in the front door. The FBI agent looked at me. What's going on? Who are you? Why are you here? The agent told him. Darian was skeptical. Can I see your badge? The agent showed it to him, and Darian excused himself to the bathroom, where he proceeded to call the Detroit FBI office, thinking someone must be playing a terrible joke on us. They told him it was a real agent in our house. Darian came back out and sat down by me, pressing his leg next to mine, taking my hand. I pressed up next to him. His body was tense, his shoulders down. I could tell from his eyes he was shocked, confused, scared like me. The agent shifted his feet and cleared his throat. So, yeah, I've been sent here by my office to notify you that your father has been arrested and to ask you some questions. Now, I'm not used to this type of field work. I'm more like an investigative accountant, white collar crimes. I can see you're having a hard time, and I'm a bit thrown myself. I knew this guy wasn't like the FBI agents you see in the movies. I don't understand. I was stammering. You think, Dad, he's just this guy the police have been looking for? The one from the 70s? Yes, we have reason to believe so. I stared off into nowhere for some seconds, then shook my head. That's not possible. In December, back in Wichita, the wrong guy was arrested. Maybe there's some kind of confusion again. Maybe Dad was trying to solve the crimes, got himself tangled up in something somehow. You know, communicating with the police, maybe. I was searching the agent's face, hopeful for something, anything to make sense. I talked to Dad on the phone last night. He hasn't ever done anything wrong. He's a good guy. And rapidly I ran through my dad's credentials: military service, jobs, church president, Boy Scout leader, dutiful son. Darian spoke up what he could. The agent said, You could be describing me. Hmm. Yes, he's a normal, regular guy. That's what I'm trying to say. That's him. I pointed to a photo of my dad and mom together hanging on the wall. They were dressed up and smiling. It had been taken for the church directory. The agent looked at the picture, a bit puzzled, and down at his nowhere again, then looked back at the agent. What dates are we talking about? The crimes. The years 74, 77, 86. Brian was born in 75. He looked down at his notes. Yes. In 86. What month? September. We went to California, Disneyland, the month before in August, before third grade. Oh, do you remember anything from September 86? In 86, third grade, I was 8. Dad worked at ADT, drove used to installed alarm systems in people's homes. Someone was murdered in 86 in Wichita? Yes, that's not possible. I mean, Dad couldn't have. Dad's not. You guys got it wrong. I was off looking into space again. Our neighbor was murdered down the street, strangled. It was never solved. Terror seized me. I closed my eyes tight, putting my head down. Something is very wrong. BTK strangled women, and it was likely very true. Tears strung my eyes. I turned to Darian, my face wide with fear, my mouth open. I hadn't cried yet because I was too shocked, but now the tears began and wouldn't stop for a long time. I turned toward the agent, dropping my eyes and wiping my face on my sleeve. I then wrapped my arms tightly around my chest and said quietly, "Our neighbor, Mrs. Hedge, she was murdered down our street, lived between us and my grandparents. Her body was found out in the country, strangled. It was never solved, I don't think. Mom and Dad used to talk about a man who had taken her to dinner, and she was a widow, but I don't think he has ever charged. I don't think he was ever charged. I don't remember. I was young. When was this?" The agent's eyes stayed calm, his voice steady. He wasn't writing on his notepad anymore. Uh, 84? It was the end of first grade. I broke my arm at church around then. Before, after, I'm not sure. I counted on my fingers, thinking of years in school. Oh, tub races. I tripped walking back to the car with Mom and lost my tooth in a red snow cone. Then the next day I broke my arm, bad. Was in the hospital for days after, got pins and everything. I held up my scarred right elbow to the agent, like I always did when telling that story to someone. Dad wasn't home that night. My stomach sheared again. I squeezed my eyes shut tight, then slowly opened them and searched the agent's face. Dad wasn't home the night she went missing. He was on a camp out with my brother. Brian was 9, close to 10. Scouts, maybe? How you know your dad wasn't home? It stormed that night. I was scared. Thunder rattles our home. Sometimes the house shakes. I crawled into bed with Mom. I wouldn't have if Dad was home. Slept on his side of the bed. Did that sometimes when he was gone. I only remember that night because our neighbor lady went missing. Mom and Grandma Eileen were scared. My arm wasn't broken yet. I must have broken it after she went missing. You knew this Mrs. Hedge? A little, yeah. Mom and I would talk to her when we would walk past the house going to my grandparents' house. She'd be out in the yard. I remember her leaning on a rake, waving hello once. She was nice. I was sad when I heard she'd been killed. Scared, too. Didn't want to walk by a house anymore. Would cross the street so I didn't have to be so close to it. Mom would have to coax me past. More thinking. A cop came by. I was bouncing on my pogo stick in my driveway, so no broken arm yet. Asked my mom some questions after she went missing, and he was talking to all the neighbors. She went missing, you think, in early May 19. Do you remember anything else? Dad didn't. I mean, I stopped talking, was off looking into nowhere again. I need to make some phone calls, the agent said as he stood up. We offered him our spare room we had turned into storage space and a small corner office for me. When the agent came back, he said, "Would it be okay to take a DNA swab for you? We need to match it to some samples we have." The agent didn't have a kit, wasn't prepared. Standing in the living room, the three of us talked through this perplexity for a bit. My mind latched on to this solid problem, something tangible I could do and think about. That wasn't Dad. I finally said, "I can grab a couple of cotton swabs and resealable sandwich bags and you can swab my mouth." Shaking, I went and got the items while the agent called our local police department. He was thinking we might need to head down to their headquarters for a collection. We settled on taking the samples ourselves, standing in the kitchen in front of the bundt cake. I swabbed the inside of my cheek with the cotton swab and dropped it into the bag. I repeated the process at some point, joking, "This is how they do it on CSI." All reality was lost. The agent handed me his business card with his phone numbers. I carried his card in my purse for years, but today I can't remember his name. The FBI recommends you don't talk to the media. It could make things worse. Why would the media be trying to talk to us? Make what worse? He picked up the bags from the counter, bid us farewell, and left. We never saw him again. I walked down our hallway, gently lifted the picture of my dad and mom off the wall, and set it in my closet facing the wall. That was the last picture of my dad I'd ever have. I'd never put his picture on display again. He'd soon be on the front of all newspapers and TV anyway. Okay, that was a bonus for you and me. See you soon. Peace.